Jason Lafay, and I've taught, this is my 13th year of teaching.
How did you end up in education?
It's an interesting question, Matt. I basically, I guess, like most teachers, I wanted to make an impact. I wanted to try to change society by inspiring young people to become engaged by whether it be the political process or just doing some sort of endeavor which basically help people or gave back or try to raise people's awareness about some of the problems that are going on and issues.
What are some things you would like to tell people about the teaching profession?
I think it's a very rewarding profession. I think it's a profession that is, I think, kind of misunderstood, because I think a lot of people's experience with teaching is usually as a student. So given the fact that most people don't become teachers themselves, at least in a formal sense, they sometimes kind of forget that. And a lot of their memories and experiences with teachers are based more on their high school years or farther back during their schooling. And I think because they don't have more recent kinds of interactions or experiences like that, they tend to forget about it. A lot of people, you're trying to please students largely, you're trying to please yourself, you're trying to please parents, and it's very difficult because there's an expression, right, that goes, if you try to please everyone, you end up pleasing no one. And I think sometimes this creates a kind of a dilution effect sometimes on the quality of the instruction and learning that goes on.
What are a few challenges that face education today, and how are you coping?
I think there's a culture right now that's developed that is very scrutinizing teachers, putting teachers under intense microscope. And I think sometimes that scrutiny, although it can have positive effects, I think it engenders in teachers the sense of a lack of trust, that people don't feel that you know sort of what you're doing. If you're a professional, you're a professional, you were educated, if you've taught, especially for a number of years, you feel as though the system, legislators, don't fully believe that you're up to the job, and you feel like you're constantly having to prove yourself over and over again. And that can be an extremely frustrating way to feel, because this job, as I said before, is so challenging. When you add on top of that, it just almost seems like it can almost sometimes feel like it's insurmountable, that you never feel that what you're doing is adequate, that has a solid basis, and that you're not good enough.
What is one thing missing from our educational system that you would like to see implemented?
I would like to see more of an emphasis on project-based learning. I would like to see it go away, not so much emphasis on standardized tests. I think you have to have some testing, but I think ultimately we need to incorporate more project-based learning. I think we need to incorporate more critical thinking. I think more creativity, more innovation, more interpretive kinds of activities where there isn't necessarily a right or wrong. It's more how well did someone explain how they're examining or looking at an issue. And I'd like to see students involved more in real world kinds of scenarios where they are collaborating with local businesses, local governments, colleges, universities, things along that matter, where they get real hands-on experiences, so they see the value in what it is that they're learning, rather than it feeling like it's something that they have to do, or it's being imposed on them, even if they're not interested in learning that kind of subject matter skill. Now that's not to say that students shouldn't have some learning in some areas that they're not interested in. I think there is something to be said about a well-rounded individual, but I think even in that, again, I think the more you can show students how it will benefit them in the future, I think the more motivated they will be to learn, because I truly believe that most students, it's not that they're lazy. I mean, there is instances where people are being lazy, obviously, but I think it's more due to a lack of motivation.
Okay, what would you like to change about our school that might help student achievement, the overall culture of the school, or perception of those on the outside who really don't know the demands of day-to-day operations in a high school?
I think just better PR. I think we have to tell our story, the stories that are happening here on a day-to-day basis. I think our superintendent, Dr. Dieter, sees that. I think Mr. McKean sees that. Mr. Wade does. But resources are scarce. We've had a lot of budget cuts. I'm not trying to use that as an excuse, but people are pressed for time. There's all these reforms that are happening, these requirements that are state mandated, and it's very hard to find the time and sometimes the resources to get those kinds of stories out. There's so many great things that go on in the school, and every day that students do, fantastic work that students do, and teachers do. I mean, this clearly shows a dedicated staff and a staff that's willing, despite some of these recent challenges, to continue to work hard. And I think our students need to know that, and we take these things for granted. We do it to all, to each other. We do it across the board. So I'm not trying to say students don't appreciate their teachers. What I'm trying to say is that we need to start appreciating what all of us do collectively, and we need to start being our advocates for each other when we do these really positive things and support each other. Because if it is true that we're under siege right now from many different parts of society, then we really need to start pulling for each other, because it's hard enough as it is, right? Just doing this every day.
What would you say to someone who is entering the teaching profession?
I would tell them to be ready for a lot of challenges. I don't know how starting teachers go in now. I can remember when I was, but I think it's a very different environment now. How they would go in, giving just how hard it is just to get your repertoire, to get, to figure out what you're doing, to try to tie objectives to your lesson plans, to come up with a variety of assignments that engage students, to relate to them in a human way, to be patient with them, to understand that they're all going through individual, experiences and circumstances. I would tell them to be careful, think very thoroughly, be very patient, do not take things personally, and try to understand that a lot of the issues that happen many times is not because of something they've probably done or not done. It's more, again, because of this overall culture that people are sort of reacting against.
How do you hope your students will remember you?
I would like to be remembered as someone that really cared, as someone that really tried to make a difference. They made mistakes, and they messed up, and they weren't perfect, and they didn't try to be, and that any mistakes that they made, that they were well-intentioned mistakes. There wasn't an evil agenda behind it. It wasn't trying to take advantage of someone or make someone feel inferior or make someone feel like they didn't matter or they didn't count. Because obviously no one likes to feel like that. I don't like to feel like that. So if I made teachers or students feel that way, then I'm hoping that I'll be forgiven for that, and instead they'll focus on the positive things that I try to do. They'll see the larger picture, but beyond that, I really don't matter that much, really, in the grand scheme of things, right? I'm living my life, I'm about roughly halfway through it, eventually I'm going to pass on. What's more decisive, I think, is the things I try to stand for, the ideas, the concepts, and I don't mean like a political philosophy or like a religious viewpoint. I mean just trying to accept people for who they are, and to try to be a good person and a caring person, and to try to help people realize their full potential.
To what degree is creativity important to teaching and learning?
I think it's crucially important, because I think that gives the motivation for people to want to learn. That we can try to capture in maybe different ways. Maybe having students write more reflections, maybe having students do more performance type of things. And Mr. Croley does an excellent metaphor project, which I think really kind of gets at more of that kind of assessment, the type of assessment that I'm talking about. I think there's a lot of potential. If you look at the history of education, there are instances where these types of ways of measuring learning have occurred, and I think to just only look at the more recent history, I think is, it's shameful. I think it's very narrow-sighted. And we know that other cultures do this, or at least more of this kinds of assessment, and they have been successful. So,
What profession other than teaching would you like to participate in?
economic development.
What profession would you not want to participate in?
Being a celebrity.
What baffles you?
Everything.
What is a strength?
Being able to synthesize a wide variety of different information and ideas and put them together into a unique, sort of more, maybe a novel combination.
What is your weakness?
Probably being too impetuous, not being patient enough.
What about the future are you looking forward to?
Nothing.
What about the future scares you?
Nothing.
What's your favorite sound?
The sound of one hand clapping.
What is your least favorite sound?
My least favorite sound? Empty classroom.
What are 3 songs you would find on your iPod?
3 songs? Any songs by a band, British rock group called The Fall.
What are you thankful for?
For my health and the fact that I teach in a district as good as this.
Besides home, where is one place that you feel at home?
Here.
What is the first thing you'll do immediately following this interview?
Put some grades in the computer, because I got to get them in there. Thank you. You've been a great audience.
Thank you for your time.
You're welcome. I'm Jason Lafay, and I approve of this message. That she recently got a year ago. It's a fat cat. So I like to I kind of peck on it, like squeeze his belly.